We are the protectors of humanity and its judges. When the shadows strike, we strike back. From the outer dark we come, and into the depths we shall return. The Black Sea, beyond the stars, calls to us.
The Legiones Astartes would sire many successors to enact the will of the Imperium across the stars. Some would epitomize the Ecclesiarchy's teachings, others would champion the honor of their forebears, and many would lose their ties to their kin with the waning millennia. Yet among the Adeptus Astartes, not all would be regaled as heroes or paragons of the Imperium, for some would serve a darker purpose in the most perilous of war zones. Chapters such as the Hunters of the Void, the Carcharodons. Much of the colloquially named Space Sharks chapter would remain obscured from history. Records of their origins conflict, with some scholars citing their founding as among the primogenitors of the Second Founding, whilst more scrutinous historians cite their formation during the 23rd Sentinel Founding. Though not conclusive, many cite the 19th Legion, the Raven Guard, to be the origin of their gene seed, citing the first Shade Lord of the Great Crusade, Arcas Fowl, as their prime ancestor. A Terran-born Astartes, Arcas would fight during the Wars of Unification in the name of the 19th, prior to his reunion with his gene sire, Corvus Corax. Known to detest the Terran stock of his legion, Corax would implement changes to supplant their command hierarchy with Astartes of his own homeworld of Deliverance. Supplanting the cold-blooded methods of war inherited from the Xeric tribes of ancient Terra, the warriors of the 19th would adopt the guerrilla warfare and stealth tactics championed by the veterans of Lycaeus. The Legion's prior service to his reunion garnering a reputation as an occupying force, their oppressive tendencies would stand in opposition to every virtue Corax upheld as a survivor of the slavers of Lycaeus. Demoting the most senior veterans of the former Legion to line soldier duties, Arcas Fowl would be no exception. Stripped of his rank as the Lord Commander of the 19th, Arcas's 3 decades of service to his Legion would bear no favour with his Primarch. Further separating his Terran sons by combining them into small, independent nomadic fleets, Corax would cast his Terran Astartes to work alongside rogue trader fleets and other mercenary bands. Now commanding such an independent fleet, Arcas Fowl would never return to the side of his Primarch. The Raven Lord would make no efforts to call for their aid during the Raven Guard Legion's collapse during the Horus Heresy, further estranging the Terrans of the Xeric tribes from their liege. Yet records held within the Emperor's Holy Inquisition shed light on the Imperium's command to their alienated warriors. Within the mythos Angelica Mortis, they would be tasked to roam the outer darkness of the Void upon an endless voyage to ravage the foes of humanity. To set about the traitor, the alien, and the renegade without mercy, and harrow them in their places of strength. Of all the deeds of the Carcharodons, none would be more infamous than their involvement during the Badab War. Following their confrontation of Abaddon the Despoiler's 7th Black Crusade and the War in the Deeps against the Tyranid menace, the Carcharodons would be embroiled in a civil war of immense proportions. During 910.M41, the Astral Claws chapter of Adeptus Astartes would secede from the Imperium and hold dominion of the Maelstrom Zone. Alongside the Executioners, Lamenters, and Mantis Warriors chapters, the chapter master of the Astral Claws, Luft Huron, would stand defiant against the vast loyalist armies of the Exorcists, Fire Angels, Fire Hawks, Howling Griffins, Marines Errant, Minotaurs, Nova Marines, Raptors, Red Scorpions, Salamanders, Sons of Medusa, and Star Phantom chapters. Causing tension between both sides at the arrival of the unknown combatants, the Loyalists would manage to validate their Imperial authorization protocols from the ancient warships. Offering their aid in the battle, the Carcharodons would claim to have answered a summons sent from the throne world itself, Holy Terror. Tyberos the Red Wake would submit himself to gene sampling and produce Ancient Notice's patent of their deeds, and be deemed loyal by the loyalist commanders. Lord High Commander Karab Kuln, Chapter Master of the Red Scorpions, would allow for the Carcharodons to fight within his lines of battle and deploy them to the Endymion cluster. Confronting the Mantis Warrior secessionists, the Carcharodons would systematically annihilate the Mantis Warriors and drive them from the Endymion sector. Joining the final battle of the War of Badab Prime during 913.M41, the Carcharodons would sabotage the planet's geothermal reactors to rob the planet's defense batteries of power. The hive cities of Badab Prime would incur tectonic upheaval from the lack of power, consuming swathes of the hives into molten seas of lava. Victorious over the secessionists, the Carcharodons would return to the Endymion sector to harvest new recruits from the training grounds of the Mantis Warriors. With agreement of the Firehawks, the Carcharodons would enact their Red Tithe and venture once more into the darkest voids of space, continuing their ceaseless persecution of the enemies of the Imperium within the most perilous of the outer reaches of the galaxy. Little else is known of their deeds prior to the return of the avenging son of the Imperium. Battling the Wordbearers Legion upon the world of Bador 5, in the wake of their victory against the traitor forces, Primaris Marines of the Ultima Founding would be dispatched to their long-distant chapter, their reinforcement allowing for their continued service within the most treacherous systems across the galactic edge. Incurring numerous losses during their many battles across the stars, the unconventional chapter must draw recruits from the most inhospitable of worlds. The so-called Red Tithe must be enacted by the Reaper Prime of the chapter, following the Edicts of Exile. Harvesting fresh recruits from worlds liberated by their blades, the Carcharodons replace their Astartes numbers and vast labor serf population with their claim of Imperial lives. Attrition is incredibly high in comparison to their cousin chapters due to their gene seed flaws, with few aspirants of the chapter surviving the trials to become an Astartes. Gaining battlefield experience from not only the Scout Company, but each of the chapter's battle companies, each aspirant of the Red Tithe shall be bloodied for a minimum of a solar decade before earning their revered Exile markings. Tattoos earned through deeds, designs such as spiral loops of their forearms and scalps, are symbols of their deeds in battle. Each aspirant shall be regarded only by the number of their squad prior to their ascension. Once proven to be worthy as true Astartes, new Void Brothers shall be given a Void name. Forming close bonds of camaraderie with their fellow exiles, the Ashen Claws, the former 18th Company of the Raven Guard, had turned against both sides of the war of the Horus Heresy to eke out an existence far from Imperial space. Working alongside the Carcharodons Astra on many occasions throughout the millennia, the Ashen Claws have on many occasions replenished munitions, materials, and even recruits to the Carcharodons in their times of most desperate need. Though such an ancient pact has proven beneficial to both parties, it would be a mistake to think of them on good terms. Looked down upon by the current master of the Ashen Claws, the renegade Space Marines often taunt their desperate brethren to weaken their negotiations to benefit their trade. Called the Grey Tithes, the Harvester Prime of the chapter must see to the adequate equipment maintenance and supplies of each company to allow for the fighting peak strength of the Carcharodons in their pursuit of ancient archaeotech. Trading such relics to the Mechanicus of Mars in exchange for vehicles, power armor, and weapons, the Carcharodons scavenge for every scrap of resource to continue their savage wars. Their biology, rarely observed by outsiders of the chapter, the only records of their gene seed are gleaned from the records of the Death Watch. Showing no obvious signs of mutation, the gene seed of the chapter, nonetheless, has degraded with time. Showing further evidence of their ties to the gene stock of the Raven Guard, each Astartes of the chapter's complexion shows a death-like paleness as black eyes gleam from their sockets, their phenotype transforming their aspirant's genetic makeup to share their deathly visage. Sleeping within cryotanks as they voyage across the stars, the Carcharodons lie dormant in the darkness for years without contact of the Imperium. Unleashed onto battle, once awoken from their long slumber, the veterans of the chapter watch over their junior Astartes as they sleep. For the longer one's service to the chapter, the more difficult rest becomes. With some records indicating that the oldest of the chapter's Astartes have not used the cryotank sleep assistance for Terran centuries. As a fleet-based chapter, distant from ties to the Imperium, the Carcharodons make use of any ships and war gear they can claim from the battlefield. Extensively modifying their equipment to fulfill their requirements, it is not uncommon for Space Marines of the chapter to wield ancient Phobos pattern bolters and Mark V power armor some 10,000 years in age. Fiercely self-sufficient, each battle company of the chapter define their combat doctrine and organization independently from one another, with each containing Scout Marines and Terminator-clad veterans within their ranks. Eschewing reserve companies, the battle companies of the Carcharodons seem to have abandoned the teachings of the Codex Astartes and choose to outline their own stratagems and hierarchical heraldries. Utilizing chaplains and librarians, the use of tech marines and apothecaries is more seldom within the chapter, due to their value to be preserved and kept away from the front line of battle. Each company comprises of between 100 to 120 Astartes, with as many as 30 Scout Marines, allowing for each company to carry out analysis and battlefield intel reports prior to their company's assaults. Highly disciplined and dour warriors, the chapter favors the use of shock troops to close their distance to their enemies. The command structure of the Carcharodons, despite their non-conformity to the conventions of the Codex Astartes, regardless resembles many of its outlines. The chapter master of the Carcharodons is known as the Shade Lord, following in the footsteps of the so-called Forgotten One, reputed to be Arcus Fowl. Currently attributed to the fearsome Tyberos, the gargantuan Astartes known as the Red Wake leads his chapter as an imposing and terrifying symbol of the chapter's wrath. Each company is led by company masters, with 2 of such captains of the chapter given unique roles and titles. The Reaper Prime, whilst commanding their respective company, must oversee the recruitment of new aspirants to the chapter, whilst the Harvester Prime must seek out lost technologies and facilitate trade with the Adepts of Mars. Strike Leaders act as the sergeants of the chapter, whilst Battle Brothers of the chapter are known as Void Brothers. Clad in grey armor, each Astartes proudly wears the symbol of their chapter, a great white shark set upon the dark void of space upon their left pauldron. Uniform in their panoplies of war, each warrior may adorn his ceramite with tokens and designs of oceanic predators, wounds, fanged maws, and tokens depicting their mysterious heritage. Their assault marines known as Devourers comprise the bulk of their ranks, for there also exist the elite Red Brethren, who bear the honor of marching into battle bedecked in Terminator armor. Armed and armored at all times, the Red Brethren etch red markings onto their armor and carry out the will of their Shade Lord and their respective company master. Observed to be experts at rapid deployments, the Carcharodon show disdain for methods of protracted warfare. Experts of stealth, infiltration, and surprise attacks, it would be unwise to assume that the Carcharodons are not adept combatants without their tactics of subterfuge. Terrifying and imposing warriors, the chapter demonstrates intensely violent rampages following their simple yet effective tactics. Supported on occasion with armored vehicles, the Astartes of the chapter prefer to utilize mobile heavy infantry to fulfill their objectives. Preferring to be the aggressors in combat rather than forming defensive lines, the Carcharodon's integration of both scout units and Terminator vanguards enables for meticulously planned and devastating, overwhelming surprise attacks. Favoring drop pod assaults, Thunderhawk insertions, and teleportation attacks, the hulking warriors of the chapter are in stature alone enough to break the morale of lesser foes. Withdrawing from objectives that prove to be well defended, the chapter reorganize their men and plot new strike maneuvers as their opponents reel from their initial onslaughts. Never faltering in their patient yet deadly assaults, the continual exploitation of their enemies' weak points proved to be devastating and unsalvageable. Communicating in eerie silence, the Carcharodons prey further on their enemies' fears by organizing their advance via encrypted voxnets. Butchering their foes without a hint of a word, nor cry of pain when sustaining injuries, woe betide any foolish enough to stand in opposition of such reticent combatants. Firing ancient Ursus claw weaponry during naval engagements, the gigantic harpoons allow for the raiding of supply ships and facilitation of great hives. Following the tenets of the nomad predation pattern of fleet formation, the chapter voyage across the stars without pause and honor the heritage of their forebears, the wandering ancestors. Upholding their devotion to the master of mankind, Astartes of the Carcharodons carry devotional charms and prayer scrolls as among the most pious of Space Marine chapters. Revering the Emperor as the Void Father and Sire of the Forgotten One, the chapter emulate his eternal vigil upon the Golden Throne, as they too shall hunt his enemies across the galaxy as a beacon of light within the thickest of shadows. Ending their eternal crusade with the return of the Forgotten One, scholars and historians have no consensus as to the identity of such an enigmatic individual. Their creed predating the Imperial cult, the chapter's primal, zealous duty shall not be snuffed out by the servants of the Outer Dark.
And so, the grey-clad came from the outer night, and their jagged maw did swallow the stars, and their black gaze did mirror the void of oblivion. Their pale shadows fell upon the servants of the Skulled One with great fury from the darkness, unseen as the beast that lurks beneath the black waters. Death for death, blood for blood. Thus were the sons of Sanguinius bought respite, and did turn back upon their pursuers. And so were damned traitors of the false gods driven unto their ruin.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Carcharodons Astra are among the most mysterious yet reliable subjects of the Adeptus Astartes. Their duty to the Emperor foregoes their need for glories, for in their vigil of the darkest voids of space, there is humble valor in their deeds. While duty is its own reward, be mindful of your need for purpose. For should you find purpose in your own actions, you shall not want for vainglorious ego.